Welcome to Occupations, the podcast, where we discuss what it's like to hold specific jobs. Occupations is brought to you by lotsofmaps.com, where you fulfill your vintage map gifting needs. Visit lotsofmaps.com.
Hi, welcome again to Occupations, the podcast. I'm Andy Jagalinzer. Welcome. I've got a great guest today. His name is Colt Smith, and he is the environmental scientist for the Division of Drinking Water for the state of Utah. And we're going to learn all about drinking water and quality and all kinds of stuff, but I'll let him tell you more of that. Welcome, Colt.
Hey, thank you.
Thanks for coming on. Quickly tell me, what is an environmental scientist? We certainly know, but what is the water quality part of what it is that you do?
Yeah, so I've moved around from a bunch of different roles within the division in my time there. We are responsible for implementing and running the Safe Drinking Water Act in Utah. And that encompasses regulating every public water system in the state. And that's, roughly around 1,200 water systems.
Wow.
Looking to see that they meet all the sort of monitoring requirements, the physical facilities meet standards, literally sort of every aspect of the Safe Drinking Water Act has to be implemented and ran by the Utah Division of Drinking Water, and we oversee that. In my current role, I specifically oversee enforcement. So I get to see when somebody doesn't do that, my job is to compel water systems to come into compliance with the Safe Drinking Water Act. And so they say I wear the black hat.
You're a bad cop.
So I get to be I get to be the enforcer.
I assume you carry a gun to enforce that.
I do, but that's not issued to me by the state. That's just because I live in Utah, and they give you one when you're born. And if your name's Colt Smith, you're given two. So
I suppose that's true. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Well, great. Well, let's kind of bring it back to the very beginning. Why don't you tell me a little bit about where you grew up and your family and such?
So I grew up in southern Utah in Washington, which is right outside St. George.
Mm-hmm.
This is the most southwest corner of the state of Utah. My dad was the chief of police in our tiny little town. Fully believed that he was Andy Griffith. That was his dream job. I think it was a police department with 3 people. So he says he was chief, and he oversaw 2 people. He really was sort of Andy Griffith, and he knew every widow who lived alone in town, and his patrol every morning was going to make sure that the paper was taken in or that there was smoke coming out of the chimney. And if they weren't there, he'd check on them to make sure they were okay. He was the epitome of sort of small town, refused to carry a gun most of the time.
All right.
And when he did, it was a .22 caliber, as small a caliber as possible, and was just held this mantra of, a bad cop is the one who pulls his gun. A good cop can talk his way out of anything. And that was always sort of his stock and trade, was being able to talk down any situation. And he did it many, many times. There are countless stories of my father having a gun or being in a lethal situation and managing to talk his way out of it instead of returning fire. And that definitely carried on to me. I think his partner, mentor, stepped in after he died and helped in my life and just said, to me at one point, Colt, you have the gift of BS. You need to find an ability to make that work. You need to find what you have, your father's gift of being able to just talk to anyone about anything and go from there. And then my mom grew up in St. George down there. I think, I always like to say we were dug into Southwest Utah like ticks. We were 6 generations deep. So it was her hometown, and she worked, a couple of jobs. She was city treasurer for a minute. She worked at a retail store, and, she was the first woman in her family to get a 4-year degree. So education was a high priority. For me, it wasn't, not an option to not get a degree. And my dad was a rarity in that he was a law enforcement officer with a college degree and an advanced degree beyond that. That's still fairly rare, but extremely rare, going back into the 80s. So
right. Full disclosure, I spent a week in St. George, forced there by a broken down car, waiting for parts to come in for almost a week. And I was young and didn't have much money, and it's a beautiful community, but I was too depressed to go out and enjoy it.
That's completely fair. If I go back now, it's mostly for work. Both my parents have passed on, and I kind of have my life is here now. So it's weird to go back now. And it's very different from when I was a kid. When I was a kid, I think our town was 3,000 people, and now it's like 60 or 70,000. So it's sort
Right.
of unrecognizable to me. It feels
Wow.
very, very different than
Sure.
my childhood. But
All
no,
right.
I'm worried. My grandfather owned a service station on Main Street. I'm worried he may have been the one to gouge you for prices or for
Actually,
parts.
the place we dealt with was St. George Automotive, and they couldn't have been nicer.
Great,
And
not us. I believe that was
there
the
was no
McCarthy
gouging.
family.
Okay.
Yeah, I think that was the McCarthy. I think that was the MacArthurs who owned that place.
Okay. And we're talking 30 years ago. For the next 6 or 7 years, we got Christmas cards from them sort of asking, telling us that there's a $5 off of an oil change. But going from Massachusetts to Utah to save about $5, probably it was a wise decision not to go there and
Yeah,
do that.
yeah, it's probably yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Good experience, though. We liked it, even though it was very depressing and maddening, but it was still nice. And you're in Salt Lake now, right?
Yes.
Okay,
Yeah.
great. How long have you been in Salt Lake?
2008, I think, is when we moved here.
Okay.
Started the department in 2008.
All
So
right. Well, let's find out how you got to where you are. Typical elementary school.
walked to school every day
Okay.
through a desert. It was so undeveloped. It was great. I just walked through a completely undeveloped desert to get to class every day.
Nice.
So it's sort of the opposite of uphills both ways in the snow. I, talk about seeing rattlesnakes walking to school instead. So,
Wow. Lovely. Was there ever a time where you thought law enforcement was going to be your future?
oh, huge. Yeah, absolutely. That was large. That was the big plan for quite a while.
Okay.
One of the things I did when we started in 2008 was I went to the police academy and graduated.
All right.
From the police academy here. The big plan, and I still wanted to do something environmental.
Mhm.
The goal was EPA has a criminal enforcement division, and the plan was to do that, was to work as a Fed and to do EPA criminal enforcement. And so went through post, graduated, started doing FTO with a couple of departments here, field training office out in the field, and liked it. There was stuff I liked. In fact, here in Massachusetts, my grandfather, who was my dad's sort of mentor, my adoptive chosen grandfather, encouraged me to apply to the Massachusetts State Police to get some experience before applying to EPA, because state police departments are so good and they have a phenomenal sort of program there that he pushed for that. And I did apply and got accepted to go start their police academy all over again. But the timing just didn't line up with my wife's, with her finishing school, and I kind of lopped into a decent gig at Utah Department of Environmental Quality. So we kind of bided our time and said, well, we'll apply again. And 2008, the financial crisis happened and nobody was hiring. So every police department sort of went on a hiring freeze, but I was already locked in at DEQ. So we kind of stuck it out and ended up becoming a phenomenal career.
All right. Well, so you were thinking law enforcement through elementary. Was it through middle school as well and high school?
I thought about it in elementary school because it was the 80s and Miami Vice was cool and my dad was a cop and all the TV shows had, cool 80s cops. And so that's what made me want to do it in the 80s and in elementary school.
Mm-hmm.
Middle school, high school, I was much more interested in entering politics.
Huh.
I wanted to run for office. I was fascinated with history. I was fascinated with policy. I was fascinated with, real dorky stuff. I think 8th grade, I set my New Year's resolution to read a biography of every U.S. president that year and did.
Huh.
Just real popular stuff, just the coolest things you can pick to do as an 8th grader.
Yeah, that's a passion project, right? It's you obviously were clearly interested in that and immersed yourself in it. And that's great. I love that.
Yes. And that was sort of the plan. And
okay.
So, I followed that for quite a while. Like that right up until the police academy. And even in the police academy, I was like, well, I can be a cop who runs for office someday. Like,
you could run for sheriff. I know in some counties, right? You can.
absolutely.
It's a political appointment. So at what point did you think science was a potential? Were you good at science? Were you good at math? I mean, what was it that made you think, well, the science is something I might be interested in, even if it's not your number one choice?
I mean, I always liked science and I loved it and wanted to do it up until science collided with math. Whatever that happened in school, I went, oh, these are the same thing. I can't do this.
Okay.
And I was terrible at math. I had this like just mental block about doing it. I had a teacher in, I think it was in ninth grade, who was my algebra teacher. I was in all the honors classes in everything but math. I was in AP everything but math. And then I was in like the most basic, just above remedial you could be in. And I had a teacher who was able to teach me algebra. He was my first year teacher. He was terrible. He was a terrible teacher in a lot of respects. Like, he could not control the classroom. It was wild. I got hit in the head with gum, not even being targeted, just like it was like a cartoon chaos classroom. But at some point he bailed on teaching everyone and pulled like 4 of us aside who were paying attention and just taught 4 students.
Wow.
And years later, I have a very good friend who's a vice principal who I was like, I'm going to reach out to this guy and let him know that like I got a degree in environmental science and like how much I minored in statistics, and that like it clicked, and like I trace it back to him giving me this confidence that maybe there's something there. And he's like, oh, that's great. And he's like, what's his name? Maybe I know him. And I told him the name and he goes, do not send that email. I had to fire that guy last years ago for being the worst teacher I've ever seen. He's like, he never figured out how to manage a classroom. And I was like, so he's a great tutor and a terrible like classroom administrator. So he's like, do not send that email. Do not encourage that man to teach. He should find something else to do.
All right. Well, that's sad, but at the same time, he was effective at least with one person, so that's good.
Yeah, no, and I kind of did a like hyper focus when I got at some point. I was like, I should be able to do this, and so I read books on how to be better at mental math and got a little bit better at it. And then when I got into college, it clicked enough that I got through it. I was like, oh, I can do this. Like, I can. Like, this confidence kind of built around it.
Sure.
And a lot of it was just like I wasn't interested. And so once there was some interest around math, and I could see it applied, especially things like statistics, I was all in. Because there's a practical application, and I can actually see like, there's trends, and you can see things. It became a whole other kind of world. And that was really fun.
So would you consider yourself good at math at this point?
Yes, I would. I would say I'm good at it now, but it was largely through work versus natural aptitude. Like, I'm not one of those people who got it right away.
Yep.
But I'm someone who was able to hyper focus enough that I could figure it out. And, I do fairly advanced mathematics at work sometimes, be it calculating MCLs over time or modeling like projected future exceedances for a system. There's stuff that I do that I'm like, this is decently complicated math. And I will say this, I am better at Excel than I am at math. I'm really good at a spreadsheet, and the spreadsheet is really good at the arithmetic part of it.
Okay, got it.
And if they'd have let me do high school math just in Excel with my skill set now, I'd have been phenomenal.
Sure. But it's good that you understand it all, versus just, I don't know what's happening, but I'm going to input it into Excel and it'll do it magically.
Right.
It's an interesting thing that you were able to kind of pull out of that, well, I'm not good at math, because it seems like math is the one subject where people either will say they're good at it or they hate it. There doesn't seem to be an in-between for the most part, but usually the people that say, I don't understand it and I hate it, have already given up on it. But the fact that you actually forced yourself in a good way to go and learn it and understand it, and obviously had a teacher that had great skills for you and no one else, that's a victory. That's wonderful. I love the story because I don't hear that.
Right.
Especially with math.
And I think a lot of it with math, one, we are really bad at teaching it
Hmm.
in a lot of places, and it's gotten better.
Okay.
I have a kid now, and when she started elementary school, and they started the way they were teaching it now, and you'll hear parents complain about the new math or whatever. And I'm like, this is so much better. Like, this is like opening up like different ways to look at how problems work.
Sure.
And a lot of it, they'll teach things like, oh, you get this to 10, and then you add it to it. I'm like, oh, this is the stuff. These are the tricks I taught myself to make it work that are now being like incorporated into the classroom, because there's certain ways that like brains will make that click. And with her, it was similar. She really struggled with math all through sort of elementary school, and all of her teachers said, you have a math brain, which is very different than a lot of what my teacher said. It was like, oh, he's not a math kid. He's a genius at writing or history or recall, but he's never going to be great at math. Yeah. And it was very different. It was a different sort of encouraging environment. And I think you can pull out of it. Like, you can learn anything. Like, if I can learn about Ulysses S. Grant seeking a third term, I can learn how an equation works and figure out those rules.
You're the living, breathing proof of it. So it clearly does happen. But especially, like you say, from people, I'll say our age, a little older, that when we went to school, it just wasn't viewed the same as it is today. And like you said, well, they're not good at it, so let's have them concentrate on something else versus, okay, well, we can get you there. That's a wonderful thing you should be very proud of.
Yeah, it's definitely exciting. It's definitely something I feel like a lot of encouragement around.
Well, and especially since it's part of your job now. I mean, it's a big part of your job.
Yeah.
That's great. So what grade was that you had your terrible teacher?
Ninth, so freshman year.
Okay. And so,
and I had done science fairs. Like, I had won regional and state science fairs and done pretty well in science fairs. But then once they collided with math, I was like, oh, I can't pursue a career in the sciences.
Then that's prior to that. After that, did you change your tune? I mean, was science once again thought of as a possibility in your sophomore year, let's say?
I think it was something I would have loved to have done, but I was more interested in politics and law. And I always thought I'd go to law school.
Yep.
That seemed like sort of the natural, progression. But, so I might have thought about it, but it was not anything that was high on my list.
Okay.
I thought environmental law. In fact, there's like photographs my mom took on a trip to DC, that she put on a scrapbook page. It says Colt's future offices, and one was like the Capitol, one was the EPA, one was the Department of Justice.
Wow, nice.
We knew I was going towards government.
Well, and obviously you didn't get there politically, but you're certainly working for the government now in a different capacity. But that's great. So you finish high school and you're still thinking maybe law enforcement, maybe politics.
At that point, it was definitely politics.
Well, it was definitely politics.
Law enforcement had definitely subsided.
Okay. And
I was leaning, more. I thought I would be a prosecutor, maybe, or environmental law, or something that would lead to politics, a more clear-cut, pathway to running for office.
Got it. All right. So you graduate high school, and off you go to.
I actually did an LDS mission.
Oh, okay.
Right out of high school. I was not raised LDS. I was raised sort of agnostic. Basically, I always say I was baptized LDS so that my grandmother would get off my mother's back about it. And I, in turn, got the Imperial Trading Post Lego set. Was like the deal my mother made with me if I would get through that. So,
wow.
But then in high school, there was sort of peer pressure, and I knew I didn't want to start college right away, and I knew I didn't. So I was looking at either the Marines or the Navy or an LDS mission. And I had an uncle who said, if you go on an LDS mission, I'll pay for it. And I was kind of debating, and legitimately George W. Bush got elected president. And I went, oh, we're going to war. I'm not joining the Marines. like the day that he was elected, I went, oh, I see where this is going. This is not for me.
Fair enough.
I was like, 90s relative peace, quick, I was probably could have hung that, would have been fine. But I was like, I think I'm out. And so I went on a mission without knowing almost anything about it. Very, very unique, rare. I ended up in Oakland, California for 2 years and loved it.
Huh.
It was like, I always say it was a phenomenal missionary and a terrible Mormon. Like, phenomenal. It was talking to people. It was speaking in front of a crowd. It was wearing a suit, walking around. And politically, I legitimately put it through the political lens of like, if I'm going to run for governor of Utah, serving an LDS mission feels like a prerequisite.
Right? Yeah. Yeah. I guess you kind of can't ignore that LDS connection in Utah. Yeah.
So loved being a missionary, got home, and immediately almost sort of went, I think I could be done with being LDS.
Okay.
Didn't happen quite immediately, but pretty quick thereafter.
Okay. So, but you still got a lot out of the mission, right? I mean, it sounds like you learned a lot of skills for sure.
100%.
Yep.
Like I said, loved my mission, great connections, made friends who I'm still friends with.
Great.
No regrets about that.
Yep.
And I really didn't want to start college right away. Like, I think 18, my brain was not prepared for it. It wouldn't have gone well.
Do you think that mission, now you said that it would be good for you to run for governor. Did that change your tune at all when you did do the mission? Was there something in there that sort of said, maybe this isn't for me? Or were you still on track for politics after that?
Very on track. I came home and immediately went to a meeting of the Washington County, Utah Democratic Central Committee meeting and volunteered.
All right.
Like almost immediately. And then what was that? That was 2003. So 2004, I volunteered and started doing field work for the Kerry campaign, kind of traveling to Colorado and Nevada and swing states, and simultaneously got a job running a state Senate race, managing a state Senate campaign in Washington County for an incredible candidate named Dixie Andrus. She was phenomenal. She'd been an educator forever. She'd been my vice principal in 6th grade.
Huh.
We raised just a ton of money, did very, very well for a Democrat in that part of the state in that election cycle. She got around 42% of the vote.
Wow.
I think the previous 3 candidates averaged in like 28 to 30%.
Wow.
So success in everything but the winning.
Well, but that's okay. Like you said, it's not exactly a Democratic state, so especially that area, I'm assuming. So that's
not at all.
That's great. What became of her after that?
I think she enjoyed retirement after that.
Experience. You certainly got a lot of that. What was next for you?
I was going to school. I was at then what's now Utah Tech University, kind of figuring out what I wanted to do next.
Okay. What was it then?
Dixie State.
Dixie State. All right.
The region of southern Utah was known as Dixie because it was originally founded to grow cotton by Mormon pioneers. So if you were Southern and joined the LDS Church for, during the 19th century, they sent you there. It's funny, I'd end up with like Southern roommates when I went to college, other places, and other places I'd had Southerners, and I'd have these Southern colloquialisms, and they're like, how do you know that? I'm like, I don't know. It's just how we talk where I'm from. Like, it's not that way now. Now it feels very much like a Utah Palm Springs, but when I was a kid, you would have thought we were Southern. Like,
wow.
It was a Southern accent town.
Well, there's Southern and then there's Southern, right?
Mm-hmm.
Were you going for political science? What were you doing there at
Poli-sci?
Poli-sci. Yep. Okay.
Started as poli-sci.
Yep. What kind of course were you headed on? Was there a specific track that you were doing, or was it a generic track?
My plan was, and at that point I'd somewhat shifted. I didn't know that I wanted to be on the top of the ballot. I thought I just wanted to run campaigns. The West Wing was on TV, so I wanted to be Josh Lyman or Toby Ziegler from that show.
Okay.
And that was where I thought I was going to be, was someone who managed campaigns and be a staffer.
Sure.
And I ran Dixie's campaign.
This was while you were still in school at that point?
Still in school.
Okay.
Yeah, I was 23.
Yeah.
Ran her campaign, and I ran for the vice chair of the Utah Democratic Party.
Okay.
And outperformed by a long shot where I should have been. Ended up coming in a very close second in that race.
Wow.
And had no business. I was running against the former press secretary for the last Utah governor and someone who had sat on the Salt Lake County Central Committee for 6 years.
Wow.
And ran a very successful campaign, just sort of targeted it on, if you're going to be a party for the whole state, you need to have people from the whole state.
Right.
Quit ignoring Southern Utah. The Iraq War was happening, and I sort of made the argument as I quit. Now I say this as a 40-something, quit electing people who aren't draft eligible, who aren't, none of your friends are shipping off to the Middle East and mine are.
Right.
Like, if you want people, I ran very sort of on an anti-war platform, and like, my voice matters more than yours at this point. And it resonated with a lot of sort of older voters. They're like, yeah, no, he's right. Like, that makes sense. So I did very, very well in that. And that kind of got me a lot of attention. Got me another job as a field director for a congressional campaign, this time paid, and also parlayed into a congressional internship for Utah Congressman Jim Matheson that took me to D.C.
Wow.
And was the first, and as far as I know, the only, at that time, the Democratic congressional intern from Dixie State College.
How did that campaign go?
It didn't go nearly as well. It was a lot more chaotic and not nearly as well organized. And my ego will say it's because I wasn't in charge, but in actuality, it was just the candidate really didn't want to run. But, you know, it was a good resume line.
Yeah. Were you in Washington long?
Yeah, I was in Washington for about a year or so, a year and a half. So I interned and then worked as a staff assistant and a legislative assistant. And that's when I first started handling environmental issues. Environmental issues, public lands, public health, and first responders sort of landed on my desk because I had experience in those areas. And
well, let's talk about that.
Sure.
All right. So it lands on your desk, totally unprompted. Well, you said you had experience in that. What was it that you had experience in the sciences?
More so just the environmental and public land side of it. My experience is that nobody in Utah wants to handle those issues. So I was the most junior staffer, and that made me the most qualified because nobody else wants to deal with those phone calls.
Okay.
That is the third rail of just conservatives are going to hate you if you do anything on the environmental side, and environmentalists will hate you if you don't do enough. Like, there's just no pleasing anyone. And if you're working for a Democrat, they had to please both of those people. So, and I was from Southern Utah, and so I spoke Southern Utah very well.
Yeah.
Which still serves me to this day.
Sure.
One of my mentors at DEDW said, Colt, you speak science and you speak cowboy better than anybody else we've got. Like, you speak both languages fluently.
You have to speak cowboy if your name is Colt. I mean, right?
Truly. Yeah.
I think that's
Colt
a law.
Smith. It's
yeah.
So kind of odd man in sort of situation for you. Like whether you liked it or not, you were going to get this assignment, but you embraced it. It sounds like you obviously learned a lot and learned to like it.
Loved it.
What was it about it that really kind of drew you in?
I like arguing. Like, I like debating, and I had the gift of BS. Like, I have a very good ability to disagree with someone and have them still like me. So I was never detoured by like an angry constituent phone call or walking into a hostile room where they were angry about prairie dogs and the Endangered Species Act. It never fazed me. And I had zero fear, had zero stage fright, none at all. Like, just none. It doesn't even register on my scale at all. Doesn't matter the audience, doesn't matter the crowd. So I had no problem handling sort of like the hostile calls, and I found it fascinating. You know,
wow,
how does
great.
this impact this? And the more you learn about environmental science, one, it maybe started to click some wheels, because it's like environmental science and environmental law are the two that are the most intertwined with each other of all sort of other sciences. Environmental science is driven by law and policy in a way that physics isn't. You know, if you want to become a physicist, you care what the Department of Energy is doing, but it's not driving your industry, your research, your day to day the way the environmental field is. If you get an environmental science degree, you're taking law classes. And I was like, oh, this feels like a nexus in some ways. Like,
Hmm.
I kind of like this.
I would imagine getting through the part that people didn't like about that job, the dealing with folks that had issues. Would other people feel the same way about the job if that was a cakewalk, that part of it? Do you think? Was it an interesting enough job that people would fight over it if it weren't for that one stipulation? You had to deal with folks that weren't
There are
happy.
some people who would, I'm
Yeah.
sure, but I can't tell you how many friends I've had who work in other areas of public life who are like, I don't know how you sit through environmental meetings. They are the most boring aspect of my job.
Okay.
I have friends who are city managers or working like, how do you give a crap about NEPA or, I just like, it's just monotonous. And I was like, I don't know. I think it's neat. Like,
All right. I love that. So what were you doing exactly in Washington? What was your job dealing with it, but in what way?
legislative assistant.
Okay.
That's the title.
So you were dealing with making laws in some way, making policy in some way. Was it a good time to be doing that? Were there groundbreaking things that were happening at the time?
Not as much as you might think in environmental work.
Okay.
One thing that was sort of prescient and has led me to get my job that I have now was there was some of the very first legislation around rewriting lead laws in drinking water.
Got it.
And one of the things that was sort of fascinating to me, and it stuck with me, and I brought it up in my interview when I got this job, was that I worked at the U.S. Capitol. My office was in the Longworth Building, the seat of American democracy, and we were not allowed to drink the water out of the fountains there because of the lead.
Okay. Interesting.
Yeah. I brought that up and we were working on that a little bit, but more so what you do if you're a staffer. Like, I mean, you see it dramatized and it's, we got to fight this bill. Why, 9 times out of 10, what you're dealing with is, a constituent calling in saying like, I'm having this issue trying to get this permit. Can you help me? A good staffer and a well-run office, in my opinion, is someone who understands that commitment to constituents. And it's, oh, my passport's late, or I'm trying to redevelop a golf course and I don't understand the Endangered Species Act or what I have to do for, I'm looking at purchasing property on a former Superfund site and there's these regulations and how do I navigate that? Government is confusing and part of that's by design, but there are people there who know it and can figure it out. And so a lot of it was sort of the problem solving of that.
Okay.
I remember I had a constituent who was very upset and wanted to know the process that national parks went through for the stuff they sold in the gift shop and why that wasn't all made in the United States. And I spent days talking to Congressional Research Service, the National Park Service, figuring out the procurement process for why that was there and how things ended up in visitor centers in national parks gift shops and writing a letter back. My congressman was a Democrat from Utah. He won by razor thin margins every time he ran. It was always a close election. And he made it very clear that that was the most important thing we would do.
Interesting. Huh.
So we did a lot of that.
It clicks with you. So you finished in Washington. You're heading back to Utah. What is your thought process at this point?
I was going to try and figure out what I'm going to do. My then girlfriend, now wife, is back in Utah. And it was St. Patrick's Day, right after I'd gotten back into St. George. And I got a panicked call. We're about to host a St. Patrick's Day party from I don't remember her title, someone who worked for the state Democratic Party. And she said, we need you to go run for the state legislature. And I said, and she just talked to Wayne, and she handed the phone to the chair of the state party. And the state party had issued a press release that for the first time in so many years had the entire slate of candidates was filled. There were no uncontested seats. They'd issued the press release, but the person running in the seat that I lived in, that my childhood home was in, had just dropped out that day. His job was federally funded. And so I think it's the Hatch Act forbid him from running. And so they were like, we need you to run.
Wow. And?
So I ran.
So
left the party and sprinted over to the county clerk's office. And
were you a few beers in at this point?
Probably not yet.
Okay.
Afterwards, when I got back and realized what I'd done, maybe. And there'd been a friend of mine who I was very close with in D.C., who actually, she and I were watching The West Wing. And I said, I just want to be Josh Lyman. And she went, you're so full of shit. She was like, she's like, everything about you says you want to be Bartlett. Like, you are a guy who could not stand to be standing behind the guy who's on top of the ticket. She's like, quit lying to yourself if you think you are a behind the scenes guy.
Huh.
And that kind of just stuck with me. And I was like, all right, well, I guess we're doing this. So I guess we're running. And I took off, and I was going to move to Salt Lake, and instead, I stayed in Southern Utah and campaigned and ran for the state legislature for a year because, like, if I'm going to be here, I'm going to be here.
Fantastic. So you've gotten the government fever at that point, and you were working in the political side of things, fundraising and all of that. So you had a lot in your tank as far as experience in that realm. So you certainly knew how to do the running part, right? If nothing else.
Mm-hmm. I kind of knew how to, and I was like, this time I get to do it myself. And that friend was definitely right. I remember looking back at other candidates I'd worked for, thinking like, you come on, say it this way, or no, you got to, I was like, all right, well, now I get to do it.
Yeah.
I believe I still hold the record for youngest candidate for state legislature in the state of Utah.
Wow.
I qualified, I met the age limit by a single day. My birthday was one day before election day. So I should hold that record for a while.
How old were you at the time?
24.
24. Wow.
Yeah.
Fantastic. Did they call you the kid? I'm sure they did, right?
They did call me. They called me that a lot of other things, but that was definitely one of them.
All right. Out of nowhere comes the kid. So I'm going to assume you won that election.
I absolutely did not.
Oh, no. Okay.
No. It was a very heavily Republican district.
Yeah.
I was running against a guy who good guy. All of my partisanship aside, I was like, I probably would have voted for this guy in a lot of ways. He was one of the most cordial campaigns ever, but I raised an insane amount of money. It turns out I was very good at raising money. I was very good at asking for it, and it didn't hurt that I was, 24, had like big curly hair, was very cute, and Southern Utah was filled with retirees who just thought I looked like the perfect match for their granddaughter, or reminded them of their I oozed with this sort of like, look at him. He's got that cute smile and that big curly hair and fresh face. And the idea was never that I would win, but it's like, let's make them spend resources here.
Yep. Then
maybe that guy who I was running against can't spend all his time campaigning and helping raise money for candidates and other. And I knew I was the sacrificial lamb, and
sure,
I was like, it's okay. I get, and there's some freedom in that. If you get to just say whatever, you're less worried about courting the voters. You can say what you really believe, and I did, and it was great. It was very freeing.
Again, great experience for sure. All right, so you fail to win, and then what's the next step you take?
Get married. Finally graduate college, University of New Hampshire, where I ended up finishing.
And what was your major?
It ended up being environmental science.
You saw this as the path at this point. You were headed down that road, regardless.
I think one of the things I'd learned working on the policy side, because I loved the campaign side, especially when I was super young, early 20s. It's like, it's the rush of the campaign and you just want to win.
Right. And
then you work in policy and you're like, there's actually something really rewarding about building something or solving an actual problem instead of just promising to fix a problem. I ran and it was great. And then at the end of it, it was over. And it's like, well, now what? I lost and honestly earned a lot of respect from the people that I ran against. The man I beat offered me an internship if I wanted one for him. And I was like, I feel like that's a little weird. But, he sort of said, he was like, if you ever need anything, let me know. And I started an internship or applied for an internship with the Utah Highway Patrol's legislative arm and didn't get it. They brought back somebody else. I learned about the EPA's Criminal Enforcement Division. I was like, that seems like a cool gig. They traveled a lot. You still got all of the cool 80s copness of, being a federal law enforcement, but less dangerous, shall we say, maybe. And very, seemed a little less nerve-wracking than some others. And so I think maybe that's where I'll go. And so we moved to Salt Lake so my wife could finish her degree and started looking for jobs. I looked at a couple of jobs at the state party, and it just wasn't like hitting. I was kind of like, I wanted health insurance. And so I was like, I'm going to find a state job. Got hired by DEQ, Department of Environmental Quality, part-time as a receptionist, super entry level, working for DER, which is Division of Environmental Response and Remediation. So Superfund, underground storage tanks, leaky underground storage tanks, military cleanup. But it kind of got my foot in the door and got me some stuff that I was interested in. And then I could do that and attend the police academy at the same time.
Got it.
And so started attending post and was like, well, I'll do a couple of years law enforcement, a couple of years DEQ, and I'll have a great resume when I apply to EPA's criminal enforcement. I kind of felt like I was on a path, ended up moving to full-time, graduated the academy right as the economy collapsed, had worked very briefly in a couple of departments in FTO, field training officer, which is kind of like your internship. You're out there, you're solving crime. You're on patrol, you're kind of like feeling it out. And I got put into sort of the special victims side very, very quickly. So I was investigating sort of sex crimes very quickly. And I was like, this is like the last thing I really want to be doing.
Wow.
It was really hard. I was very good at it. I failed an exercise in the academy because I didn't shoot quick enough in one of the live fire drills. I got shoot out. He's like, you should not do this. You're going to get someone killed, just up in my face, sort of like military style. I'm a very sensitive boy. And so I was like really taking it to heart. And then the next day we were in the field and we went to a sexual assault, and the person who responded, it was the husband who called about his wife. He said, something's going on. She won't tell me. I think something happened. And they left. They were working the husband. Again, nothing happens. And I interviewed her and got her to go on record about what happened, which was very reluctant. And the captain who chewed me out the day before went, I take it all back. Like, you're able to talk to women and I can't train cops to do that. You have an ability to do it. And I think, my dad had died when I was young, so I was raised mostly by a single mom. And so I think I just, unlike math, that I was able to do.
Well, and it's sad that others can't do that, I guess, but obviously it's a specialty. So that's good.
Yeah.
So the hell with your shooting, you're good at talking to women.
Yeah. I was a good shot. I just wasn't good at making the call to shoot.
Got it.
I was very hesitant about,
All right.
So I got through that. And then at some point, waiting for my wife to finish her degree, we're kind of looking at other options for law enforcement and what I wanted to do. And my sort of a chosen grandfather, who had been my dad's mentor, his best friend, said to me, he's like, I don't think you should be a cop, which was shocking because he was a career, he'd been assistant chief in Salt Lake. He'd been the deputy director of public safety. And he said, he was like, your dad and I's role models were Andy Griffith. Like, that's what we thought a good cop was.
Yeah.
The more I learned about what you report back to me, and when I talk to guys who are still on the job, he's like, they have taken that aspect out holistically, and it's almost impossible for you to do that in that way. He's like, they're trying to make you into a soldier. And I don't think that's healthy for someone to have that mentality. He's like, and I was married. He's like, you have a wife. He's like, I will tell you straight up, it is going to wreck your ability to be a decent husband. If you're coming home with that every day, with that sort of mindset versus the Andy Griffith mindset.
Sure.
He's like, so you should look at something else. And he's like, you're with the state, see what you can find there.
How did you take that? That's obviously in hindsight, good advice, but at the time, was that did it bother you that you were being told that this isn't what you should be doing? Or did you embrace that?
There are people who I wouldn't have taken that well from him. I would have accepted,
Yeah.
When he got serious and he gave you insight, you listened. Like, it was clear this was not something like he wanted to say. He was very encouraging all through the academy. He told me if I got hired on with Salt Lake City, he would give me his badge and he would unretire his badge number and I could wear it. Like, it was a thing he was very proud of me for doing.
Wow.
And he said my dad would have been proud. Like, he's like, your dad would have been so proud, so excited you were doing this. He's like, we loved being cops. And so I think it resonated because I was like, this is obviously not a thing he wants to say, but it's somebody who cares about me and somebody who cared about my dad and my mom and has been there, my entire life. And if he's saying, you should rethink this, I should rethink this.
Yeah. I mean, obviously his intentions were good too. It's not like there was some other agenda pushing him in that direction. He clearly was looking out for you. So you took that to heart, I'm assuming.
Yeah. And I probably still, I don't know that I immediately was like, well, I'm not doing that. But I was like, oh, I'm going to think about it. And then sort of fortuitously, this job opened up. It was a program coordinator at the Division of Drinking Water, and it was overseeing enforcement. And it was paid more. It was full-time. It had more of a career track. And I was like, well, I'll apply for it. I probably am not qualified. I'm sure they've got an internal candidate. Mad Men was on the air at the time, so I think my Facebook post, I still remember it was like, well, after the interview, I said, I didn't Don Draper the interview, but I at least Ken Cosgrove it. I think I did okay. And clearly I did Draper the interview. It was season 1 Draper. It was before the full alcoholism had taken effect. So, but
I like how your TV characters have shaped your life. I like that.
When you are raised by a single mother, you get equally raised by television. So that I can tell you your free throw shooting percentage if you were raised by a single mother, because that is the one thing you could do when you were left alone. And I can tell how old you are based on what you watched when you got home from school. So anyway, I went and did the interview, and my career mentor, Patty Fogger, came down and she offered me the job. It was a weird, shocking day. She came down and offered me the job, and I was working at the very front desk of the department. It was very early in the morning. We were still on 410s, so I had to be there at 7 every day. So it was still dark outside. And that morning, someone had just casually walked over to our desk and said, there's a man laying down outside the door. You might want to go check on it. I'm like, oh, it's a transient who's, it's a homeless person who's fallen asleep. I probably need to go make sure. I walk out. It was a man who'd worked in air quality had had a heart attack. And so I immediately started doing CPR and banging on a window to get someone to call 911 for me while I get an AED. And so I started immediately doing first aid on this guy, trying to flag someone down. Had just gone through this high intensity. My cortisol levels are spiked through the roof. Got this guy on an ambulance, kept him alive till he got to the hospital. And then she comes down to offer me the job. She's like, are you okay? I was like, well, this just happened. And I expect her to say, hey, we're going in another direction.
Yeah.
And she offered me the job. And I was like, I'll accept. She goes, well, okay, that's great. She was like, you'll probably be fine with any stress we throw at you then.
Well, at least they're hiring somebody that knows what to do in an emergency with a heart attack. So that's good for the health of everybody in the office. Wow.
Yeah. So
holy cow. What a roller coaster of a day.
I started 2 weeks later, moved upstairs, and I was a program coordinator, and I was supposed to oversee track systems that were on formal enforcement. And I was in that job for 30 days.
Wow. That's short.
When our database administrator had a colossal flame out and quit.
Oh.
In a big, kind of do it without me type thing. And the woman who just hired me said, okay, we're not begging you to come back. She's like, I'm just going to promote this kid I just hired. And so I was made an environmental scientist one and in charge of managing and administering a database of which I knew almost nothing.
In 30 days. Wow.
30 days.
Love it.
Yeah. But she was like, well, he was the youngest person in the office, so we figured he knew something about computers. So
I assume you did?
no, I mean, I knew enough. I knew Excel. I knew PowerPoint, but I had like very limited database knowledge. Like I knew a little bit from stuff I had done as support staff in DER, managing some of their data stuff. But I'm a phenomenal quick study.
Yeah.
And the ADHD kicked in, and I just bought every book I could find on being a database administrator on Amazon and locked myself away for a weekend and felt like, well, I know enough terminology that I'll at least be able to fake it long enough, I think, to get through probation.
Wow. What an opportunity. I assume your boss was pleased with the work you were doing, even though she probably realized you had no training at all.
She was pretty happy. And I think a lot of it was just I was very willing to do anything that was put on me, and I was pretty competent from the start.
Can I ask, did that gentleman survive? I have to ask that.
No, he did not. He was 80-something years old and still working every day.
Did you get any kind of commendation?
I did.
I bet you did.
I got a letter and commendation from the governor.
Wow. Things are good.
Lotsofmaps.com. Vintage, local, national, and world maps for an affordable price. 99% of our maps are $25 or less. Great as gifts. Frame them or put them under glass for your home, vacation home, or as a memory of a special place. Lotsofmaps.com.
What was your job entailing at that point? What were you doing?
So initially I was hired to track systems that were already under formal enforcement and to help write enforcement letters and orders.
Okay.
Which is beginning the legal proceeding of forcing a system to comply with drinking water standards. And then immediately jumped into managing the database. And most drinking water regulatory agencies use in the country, it's called SIDWIS, Safe Drinking Water Information System.
Mm-hmm.
I was learning how to run that, and that involved running queries. It involved making sure data quality was there. It involved uploading data to the feds. It involved doing all of the sort of aspects of like data management that were part of that. And then the other part of that was that they were beginning a process of leaving SIDWIS and moving to a new version of that. It would be cloud-based. It was this big thing, and cloud computing still felt relatively new. This is 2011-ish.
Mm-hmm.
It was explaining to people, what the cloud was. I did know that much. I think that's why I was the most qualified to take over.
Yep.
So I started just kind of managing the database and still doing a lot of enforcement stuff.
Mm-hmm.
It became clear very early on that I was a very good presenter, that I had no fear in talking in front of people.
Yep.
And so I was doing a ton of trainings.
Huh.
We'd go around the state to different water systems and to health departments, and I was doing a lot of sort of publicly facing trainings. And then the way that it worked is that to keep the Division of Drinking Water from losing me as the database administrator and having my job reclassified as an IT job and moving me to the Department of Technology Services, I had to first be an environmental scientist and manage a rule. And so I managed the consumer confidence rule, which if you are familiar, you probably get it in your water bill every year, or you get a mailing or an email. And you see this like chart that has all the contaminants in your drinking water system and what's there. And my job was to manage that rule, which was the easiest rule to run because we did a ton of technical assistance where we would go out and go to a conference once a year and help prep them for the water system. And then I would get them and close out the schedule. And that was it. It was a pretty quick, easy job to do, but it was a really good first rule to run because it's a report on everything that the system did that year and every sample they took and every exceedance and detection they had. You had to learn all of those rules. You had to learn nitrate, lead and copper, arsenic, and how they were played in and where the violations were coming from. And so I immediately, despite kind of doing the data side of things, had this crash course in the Safe Drinking Water Act.
Huh.
And the other thing was managing a database like that. And I don't know if this is true for other databases because it's the only one I've ever managed. Unless you knew the rules, unless you knew that when a system takes a coliform sample and it comes back with a coli, that then they have to do these subsequent steps, and then the database is going to trigger these steps. You don't know the database, so you have to know the rule in order to understand the database. And so you get this broad knowledge of how all these things work.
I would imagine you're doing a lot of queries that other folks want you to do, but now it sounds like you're able to do a bunch of things on your own, just understanding the different rules. And I would imagine also, now that you know a bunch of the rules, you can see the future too, knowing that if this happens, well, it's going to trigger a whole bunch of other things to happen, and you could be on the ball for that, I would assume. Correct?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you're one step ahead in one way or another.
Yeah.
Wow, that's great. And that opens up a whole new chapter of your life, right? Because now you're the expert in everything.
Yes. And one thing that my mentor, that she did really well, was she made sure we understood all those aspects. So she was like, go on site visits. So if there were inspections of a water system, she was like, you're going and spending 3 days in central Utah inspecting different water systems with these guys who do the inspections. And you're not going to know how to run the database if you don't know how a pump works or how a well fires up and then pumps up to a tank, and then the tank provides the pressure back down to the distribution system.
Well, that's smart. I mean, obviously, the more you know, and the better you can do your job, more effective you can do your job. That's terrific. Wow. And the fact that, like you said, your boss was encouraging to do that. So that sets you up for where you are now, I'm assuming, because now you've got the education within the division. Are you possibly more knowledgeable than anybody else in your division at that point?
At that point, no, because my boss was still there, and she's still someone I will text if I get stumped. We call her the Oracle.
Okay.
And now people just call me the new her. So
new her, I like it.
Yeah, they call me the new Patty. Patty was her name, so Colt's the new Patty.
Okay.
And that's one of the reasons I oversee and deal so much with enforcement. You have to kind of know, like, wait, hold up. They had this. Well, what about this? And one of the things that was interesting about getting the job, and one of the reasons I have the job now that I do over dealing with enforcement, is my police academy training. Is that I learned how to conduct an investigation, and I learned how to write a police report. And so I know how to build a case. And so I know how to speak lawyer very, very well.
Sure.
And so I deal a ton with the AG's office. And I told you earlier, I was like, I thought I'd be a lawyer. And the big deciding point of why I didn't is I started meeting and hanging out with a lot of lawyers and realized all of them seem to hate their job. They all seem to really not enjoy it. And I was like, I don't know that I want to hate my job that much. As I've gone on, I've learned that there are lawyers who do like their job.
Sure.
It's still a lot of that logical thought of how to apply the law. And I mean, our AGs will tell you that they love and hate working with me because I can present a legal argument that's counter to them more effectively than other scientists and engineers that they work with. Normally, a lot of other scientists do what we say because we're the lawyers, or like Colt will like pull up a case and cite it back to us and say, hold on, what about this?
Yeah.
It's interesting. It's fun to do that, and I enjoy it. And again, it's kind of goes back to I like to argue. I like debating things back and forth.
Sure.
About 4 years ago, I got promoted to Scientist 3, so high-level scientist. And one of the requirements of being a Scientist 3 was you had to start doing sanitary surveys, which are what we call our site visits.
Right.
This is like me out in the field, and I get to go out and like climb up on a tank, but I garnered this reputation. One of the other more experienced surveyors says that he's like, watching you on a survey is like watching an old episode of Columbo, for another TV episode reference for you.
There you go.
He's like, because we'll be done. Like, this guy thinks you're his best friend. And then you drop this question about like, what about pressure tanks? You got any of those in any of these basements? They're like, oh yeah. It's like, I had already asked him that question, but you Columbo him. You're like, just one more thing off just before we go. And
I assume you're wearing a trench coat this whole time too, right?
I wear a lot of trench coats.
Oh, there you go. You can always ask yourself, what would Columbo do?
Absolutely.
We've done a bunch of these interviews over the last 3 years, and a lot of times we are finding that people are learning things in some past job that they recall, and it helps them to do the job that they're in now. You clearly several times have already said that there's something from this and something from that. And I mean, you seem to have pulled it all together to make yourself be the best that you can in your job. I mean, what a great lesson in life it is, because you can always pull something from anything, whether it's good or bad, just still can learn, right?
There's that phenomenal Steve Jobs commencement address.
Hmm.
I don't know if you've seen it. It went viral. He's speaking at Stanford University,
Mm-hmm.
and he talks about all the weird things that he did, how he dropped out of college, and how he took calligraphy classes instead. He learned about the beauty of curves in calligraphy, and that's why Macintoshes were always beautiful. He wanted things to be attractive. And he has this line, and I reflect on it always. It's like, you cannot connect the dots looking forward. You can only connect the dots looking backward. You have no idea where the dot that you did in 2008 running a campaign that taught me how to work with county commissioners or prairie dogs will then pay off in 2020 when I have a national park water system that has an issue with prairie dogs compromising their drinking water well. And I happen to be an expert on two of those things. Like, you just cannot connect those dots. You would never be able to. You just kind of have to trust that everything you learn will have some relevance at some point.
Right. The terrible jobs that we all have had over our lifetimes, there's still things you can pull out of there and use later down the line. And I think that's important, to never look twice at a job, because you can certainly grab some experiences along the way. So that's a good use case of how you have pulled it all together through all of your stops over the years. That's great. Let me ask you a quick question about your day-to-day. What is your day-to-day like? And I know every day is different, but give me a sort of a scenario of what it is that you're doing.
Oh, man. So right now I'm in, like I said, I kind of oversee enforcement. So it's a lot of kind of case management.
Mm-hmm.
The boring side of it is I spend, and everyone who knows me will know that it's email. I spend so much time responding to emails.
Mm-hmm.
And now that I'm the long tenured know everything guy, I get a million emails. One piece of career advice I will give you if you're someone who struggles with this is tell your coworkers, people in your office, to stop emailing you. I've just told them all, like, I will ignore it if it comes from you. You know where to find me. You know where I sit when we're in the office, and you can IM me. Do not email me. Email is for people who can't do those things.
Fair enough. That's good.
That helps a lot. So it's a lot of email, obviously, which is the dull side, but a lot of it is scheduling site visits. And I get the benefit of doing it in Utah. I have to do 10 a year. So I get to go to Utah. It's like one of the most picturesque places on earth, and climb up on a tank and look at a hatch and then stare across red deserts or alpine meadows or whatever. Like, it's never the same view twice.
Nice.
I feel like we are fortunate in that we take a very collaborative approach to enforcement. Drinking water is unique. The people we regulate are directly consuming the thing we regulate. If you're working the clean water side, and I'm regulating a production plant that's dumping into a river, their goal is to maximize profit, not to keep the river clean. If I'm regulating your town, you might not like that I'm telling you have to deal with this arsenic MCL, but at the same time, you and your family are drinking that product. Like, you're drinking that water. We're here to help you.
Yeah.
And the Safe Drinking Water Act actually requires that if we issue a violation, we have to provide some guidance on how to correct it. Like, I can't just say, you screwed this up, fix it.
Right.
And so a lot of it is doing that collaborative approach. It's sometimes resistance. I have had a gun pulled on me before.
Oh.
More than once.
Whoa.
I've had dogs sicked on me as I've got up to serve a warrant. I've had lawyers call and threaten to sue me or have me thrown in jail, like, while I'm on a site visit. So I've had some of those kind of intense high anxiety moments. Nobody wants to be the mayor of the small town that poisoned the town or
Right.
ignored the advice or the warning. Flint was a tragedy, but I've also said the Safe Drinking Water Act is a victim of its own success in the U.S. People don't worry about their water here,
Right.
and they should sometimes. Like, things can go wrong.
Yep.
And the reason they don't is there are people who care and are interested and want to make sure that it's safe. And so my day-to-day will be writing an order to help a system come into compliance. It could be reviewing and providing technical assistance on ways they could do that. It might be helping them find funding alternatives, directing them to grant or loan programs. It could be climbing a tank, and it could be responding to an emergency where a water system has an emergency and they don't want to deal with it, so we have to issue an emergency order. It could be collaborating with EPA on new rule revisions. Still, to this day, there's some database stuff that still factors in.
Are you dealing with municipalities as much as private business?
I meant to lead with this.
Yeah.
What is a public water system is one of the most complicated things we can get into.
Dumb it down for the rest of us.
Yeah. You hear public water system and you think, well, it's the town that I live in. For me, it's, I live in Salt Lake City. That's public city, public works is who does it. That's true. But it also, when we're talking about public water system, we're talking about who has access to that water. And so the federal definition is a water system with 15 service connections or serves 25 people for at least 60 days out of the year. And so that means campgrounds, restaurants. Kennecott Copper, one of your previous guests who recommended me to you, I regulate his place of employment.
Yep.
If you listen to the Rio Tinto episode, we regulate Rio Tinto because they have wells and they have their own drinking water.
We're entwining episodes, and I like it. Craig Bushman works for a company that does a lot of mining of copper, I believe, is their biggest thing, correct?
Yeah, their Utah mine for sure is.
Yeah.
We could go deep into the nuances of that, but it's definitely outside of your scope. But there's a whole lot more about when a system trips over to public and when it doesn't, and who owns it. And I am unwittingly the expert on that. And so I get every question about that directed at me. And so there's a lot of just answering questions on that, a lot of being a subject matter expert. Today I was working with some LDS church systems on ammonia buildup in their wells for meeting houses, for church meeting houses. It's a lot of kind of being the expert in the room and then figuring out what the best course of action is to make sure drinking water is safe.
So you are dealing with companies, you're dealing with nonprofits.
Yes.
Are you dealing with municipalities as well, as far as how they deal with the drinking water itself? And individuals too? Citizens with water issues on their own land? Or
so if it was a private well, if it was, your house has a well, you would not be regulated by me. Okay. I would not deal with you. I would refer you to the local health department. In Utah, because we have a decentralized health system, I'd refer you to local health departments and you'd have to comply with those ordinances.
Got it.
Now, you want to have a total one-off, I can tell you that I personally, gospel according to me, private wells are the biggest public health crisis in America that nobody pays attention to or knows about because I have seen water chemistry there that is terrifying.
Oh, man.
Yeah, so we will deal with municipalities. I will regulate everything from Salt Lake City, 100,000 plus people, down to we have a water system called River Bend that is literally one street.
Oh, man.
With 8 connections.
Wow.
8 houses on it. And they have to meet some of the exact same standards as far as quality.
Wow.
And it's those small systems that are obviously the bigger problem. There's fewer resources. The economies of scale just aren't there.
Right.
How do I tell a street with 8 people on it that they have to install and run a surface water treatment plant if their spring goes bad? That's
who's paying for that?
So it's right.
At the same time, it's for their benefit, right?
Totally.
Yeah, that's tough.
Restaurants, we have restaurants we deal with. So there's a lot of private sort of entities. Ski resorts are huge.
I'm assuming you have a team that you work with?
I do.
How big is that team?
It is me and like two other people who dedicated most of their time to enforcement, and then that's about it.
Okay.
We do get to pull in, obviously, other rule managers. So, like if a system is non-compliant for lead and copper, we will then pull in the lead and copper rule manager, and they will help with that technical assistance. And then we have a field service section that's primary job is providing technical assistance and doing our site visits. And then beyond that, we have a service contract with a nonprofit, the Utah Rural Water Association, to provide compliance assistance. And they have circuit riders who will, true water cowboys who will drive out to the far reaches and, help figure out what's wrong with the well, why it's broken, or educate a new operator on how to replace a screen or take a coliform sample. And probably one of the things that appeals to me in my ADHD nature about enforcement is that no job is ever the same. Every case is different.
Sure.
Every solution is different. And I get to pull in all these different people and work with it. Sometimes it's working with a lab. Sometimes it's working with rural water. Sometimes it's municipalities or large conservancy districts about how are they going to treat this, or how could they get them to combine these two. And I'm very fortunate, and this is my own personal observation. My generation is really the first that grew up in the post-EPA world, like after the establishment of the Safe Drinking Water, Clean Water Act, after the environmental movement took forward. We grew up watching that. Like we grew up with Earth Day. We grew up with programs on Nickelodeon and television that were talking about protecting the planet. We grew up watching the cartoon Captain Planet, and we're raised with this consciousness in a way. And the first gen were still here. The people who were here when DEQ and drinking water was founded and became and first adopted in the state of Utah and managed the state of Utah, were still working there when I got hired. And a lot of them, this was not their first choice. They did not go to school to do environmental science. They went for civil engineering, or they had degrees in geology, or, they did not come from this. This was not their first choice necessarily.
Got it.
But with my generation and the ones coming in, it's like these guys all went to school knowing this is what they wanted to do.
Right.
So the passion and the commitment and like the care about the work we do makes it really easy to have a good team of people who give a crap. And that makes all the difference.
That's good insight because, like you said, I mean, environmental studies was not really a thing in the 70s. I don't think, for the most part. It certainly is something that people today are studying, and for good reason. Environment is a disaster. It needs help, and folks like you are doing that. Some advice for people that might be interested in working, A, in the sciences, environmental sciences, B, for the government, and maybe even C, for dealing with water.
If you care about science, you can be a scientist. If you are interested and you want to do it, don't get hung up on the fact that you're going to have to take calculus and it's going to break your brain and you'll never get through it. Because you can learn to do math. No one has a brain that does not compute with math. Bill Nye, early influence on my life, we're going to go to TV again, talked about like, if you think you're not good at math, recognize that when you get in the shower and you're adjusting the temperature, hot or cold, you're making a mathematical calculation. You are adding and subtracting. That is the same part of your brain that is firing up that when I do an algebra problem. It's the same neurons. It's the same part of the brain. Those neurons are there. They know how to do it. You can train them to do it.
There is some self-preservation with turning the water up or down temperature-wise, though. You got to admit.
Do you not remember calculus finals? Those are a self-preservation machine.
I suppose that's true.
Like, did you not have the same anxiety I did in algebra too?
I guess okay. Point taken.
But one of the things I love about my job is I get to teach a class to operators, and these are blue-collar guys who go out and turn valves and think they can't do math, and they have to take math and pass water math to become an operator.
Yeah.
And even that little story there of like, you guys can do this. Like, you know how to solve a problem. You can solve algebra. If you're going to go to environmental science because you love it, I've had phenomenal job offers for lots more money to go work in industries that I don't want to work in because I like that there's value at the end of the day in what I do. Even on my rough days, days when I hate it, I complain about the meetings or the email. I'm like, you know what though? Like, I'm going to put my kid in the bath tonight and I'm not going to worry about it because I know that I'm there.
Yeah.
That other people will too. And for government, don't get bored. And I don't know if this is true in every government agency, but everyone I've ever worked in has been more open to innovation and finding new ways to do things than any of the private jobs I've ever held. Because we don't get more resources when we need them necessarily.
Yeah.
We get more problems, and then there's not always more resources to find it. So you get to be creative, and it is almost always rewarded in that respect. The stability is nice. Like if you're someone who likes that, your job is more immune to layoffs than other industries is helpful. It's not totally immune, but there's more safety in it. And that's huge for me. I got this job in the middle of a recession, so I kind of was looking for something that was more stable too. And then water is incredibly fascinating and nuanced and not as simple as people think it is. I use the example, we have this thing called cross connection, or backflow, which is a huge issue without being protected. If you've seen like those valves that are sticking up like on a golf course or things to prevent, it's the radical idea that water can flow two ways through a pipe and that you have to prevent that. And it's the type of thing that no one else thinks about, but can cause a huge environmental impact. If somebody leaves their hose in a horse trough and that pressure changes and it sucks the water out of the horse trough into your house and the neighbor's house, and everybody's getting sick. There are so many just tiny little nuances. If you get into especially drinking water, you will never have a boring road trip. Everyone else will hate you, but you'll be like, ooh, look at that tank. I bet where's that flowing down to? Or where's that gas station getting its water? And in many ways it is innately tied to like the story of civilization.
Yeah.
Look at all of our cities. They are there because of where there's water. And if you're in Massachusetts, that is the birthplace of American safe drinking water. It's phenomenal the way that we do not think about it nearly as much as we should unless you're a complete nerd like me. And it's fun to see who it brings together. All aspects of politics, you have to give a credit about water at the end of the day. And it's, my political leanings are far left of a lot of the people I deal with, but building, respect and trust around that sort of shared value is phenomenal. It's really interesting.
Let me ask you about your thoughts about the future of water. I know that's a sort of an awful question to ask, but you being the expert,
yeah, it really is.
What are the main concerns in the near future? You're a quality guy, but we obviously are going to have a shortage at some point too, right?
Well, Utah's the second driest state in the country. So, we sort of live in the shortage, depending on where we're at, how well we do at that. From the quality side, it's going to be things like microplastics, PFAS and PFOA are the huge ones. Some of those forever chemicals, and those are going to be incredibly tricky to treat. That's a big concern.
Yeah.
As far as quantity goes, I think where we will end up, water reuse is going to become a much bigger part of people's lives than they realize. And that is where they hate it when I say this. They hate it so much. I'm going to do it anyway. Toilet to tap, sort of taking that, water that's from your toilet flushed and treating it to a level that it is drinkable and safe and oftentimes cleaner than other water. We're all downstream, but that's going to be a huge part going forward. And the bigger thing would be is if we can get cleaner, cheaper energy would make everything a lot simpler. Then desalinization becomes viable. Then water reuse becomes easier.
Right.
Great Salt Lake drying up is a very real environmental concern that has garnered national attention.
Yeah.
And it's not a drinking water problem yet until you realize that, if the lake dries up and it's blowing arsenic dust, that lands in the reservoir that then feeds down through the treatment plant And now all of a sudden treating that water becomes a lot more expensive and time consuming, and the quality will still drop.
Hmm.
So it's all interconnected.
It sounds nightmarish, and it's certainly something that we're, Mad Max Beyond the Thunderdome was, gasoline,
100%.
but,
Yep.
water is certainly the real version of that, I think, correct?
Well, that was Fury Road was water, right?
Oh,
So
that's
we got
true.
that in the we're right there.
I had to bring the movies back into this conversation because it is your specialty after all. Colt Smith, environmental scientist for the Division of Drinking Water for the state of Utah. Thank you so much for coming on Occupations and giving us a little lesson about certainly your history, but about water and science and government and all the other things that you've brought to the table. Thank you for that. Appreciate it.
Hey, you're welcome. This was great.
Join us again for another episode coming up soon. Occupations, the podcast.
Occupations has been brought to you by lotsofmaps.com. Please follow Occupations the Podcast on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram to find information about our next episode or to see what past episodes are available.